Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
Week 2 is in the books, and the Steelers are 2-0 thanks to a 26-9 win over the Minnesota Vikings. What are your quick takeaways from the Week 2 win?
I really thought the rest of the offense stepped up, but there's still room for improvement. What did you think?
I have to agree with you. It was a better overall performance than the Week 1 win over the Browns, but the offense is yet to round into form completely, and the defense is yet to be tested. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions for the Steelers. But just take a step back since we got into it right away with the Steelers win. Take a step back and look at the injury report. So we got 4 old injuries from last week that nothing new to really report on for now. Gerald Hawkins, Vance McDonald, J.J. Wilcox, and Stephon Tuitt. We'll have more updates for you later in the week, but new injuries from last weekend's game include Alejandro Villanueva and Ramon Foster were reportedly ill. Villanueva missed some time because of that illness, but he actually had to come back in the game when Marcus Gilbert left with, I believe, was cramps. And Jesse James, the tight end, got injured on the first play of the game. And yes, he did return, but he was noticeably limping throughout the course of the game. And with McDonald already inactive, that meant that there were a few plays where Xavier Grimble was the only tight end on the field for the Steelers. So that was definitely interesting too. Do you have anything to add to these respective injuries?
No, only that Bud Dupree today was limited in practice with his shoulder, and Marcus Gilbert is actually being predicted to be out for the next game, we'll talk about that more in the next podcast where we preview it. But Marcus Gilbert actually hurt his hamstring, so he's supposedly going to miss some time from that.
Interesting. That would be quite concerning. It would also be Chris Hubbard's first start of the year, most likely. But we'll get into that, as you said, in our next episode. So we'll jump right into the game since it's late and we have other things going on. But we still want to bring you some Steelers news. So on offense, this was probably, in fact, it was definitely a better game than the Week 1 win over the Browns. The first few drives, not the first drive, looked pretty good for the Steelers. They scored a couple of touchdowns and they were moving the ball pretty well, even if it won't show up the stat sheet due to penalties. How do you think the offense performed in this game?
Well, in the preview episode, I was asking a lot of receivers other than Antonio Brown to step up, and I think they did so. As sort of expected, Antonio Brown had a hard matchup against Xavier Rhodes. He wasn't exactly locked down, but he was kept to only 5 catches for 62 yards, which is a mad game for him, which is actually an okay game for most receivers, but others made up for it. No one else had a really shocking, spectacular performance. Depending, Martavis Bryant was pretty spectacular, but everyone contributed somehow. Martavis Bryant, as I said, was probably the most impressive, making 3 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown with a long of 51, which was an absolute beauty. Eli Rogers had a pretty solid day with 4 catches for 43 yards. Then Jesse James had a fairly decent day, even dealing with his injury, with 4 catches for 27 yards. Not the most yards, but he still got catches. And then Juju Smith-Schuster had a much better week than last week and caught 3 catches, including 1 for a touchdown. So overall, the passing game did pretty great. However, as expected, the run game was a bit disappointing. Bell was force-fed here, and it didn't really go over too well. Luckily, the passing game was really all the Steelers needed. Then finally, offensive line did decently, considering the reports about Alejandro Villanueva throwing up about 20 pounds of his weight before the game, and only 2 sacks were given up to Everson Griffin. So honestly, not a bad outing for the offense. It only came from one side, and that side was sick. But like I said earlier, there's still room for improvement. So how do you think the offense fared?
It was another solid performance. It was good enough for the win, but probably not good enough to satisfy Yinzers around the world. The offense put up nearly doubled the amount of output from last week as far as points go, but the offense still hasn't been able to put it all together. This is going to start mainly with the running game, Austin. As you just said, Bell was essentially force-fed this week, and I have to say I think it was a little bit better this week than last week. I feel like he had a little bit more room, but he also didn't get a ton more help than he did last week. He did make some plays, but at the same time, it felt like he was constantly being hit and wasn't getting much room. He had a nice 11-yard run, but outside of that, he really was fighting for every yard that he could get. Elsewhere, Antonio Brown had a pretty rare pedestrian day, but as you predicted, that was going to be the case. But luckily, the cast of Martavis Bryant, Eli Rogers, and Juju Smith-Schuster all played relatively well and made the big plays when needed. Uh, Obviously, you'd like to see a little more punch from the offense. You'd like to see them get it into the end zone maybe once or twice more than they did, especially when you consider that Case Keenum was the starting quarterback on the other side. But all in all, not a bad performance, and not to put a dampener or be a party pooper on Juju Smith-Schuster's first career touchdown and his first career receptions, but he did have two more penalties, so that now means 4 in 2 games for him. So that's something that he really needs to get under control. But otherwise, I felt like he played well. He had a oh my god, he had a crushing block. I forget who it was, but he absolutely depleted some guy and actually tweeted at Hines Ward afterwards as if saying like, "Do you like what you see?" kind of as paying homage to the former Steeler great there, but that was kind of an interesting play. By the way, Smith Schuster, they mentioned it on the broadcast, is the youngest player in the NFL right now at just 20 years old. So that means he's older. Sorry, I'm older than him, Austin. That makes me feel pretty old.
That's crazy. I'm luckily still younger than him.
Yeah. But in any case, yeah, not a terrific day for the offense, but again, they did what they had to do, and I guess early in the season you'll take the wins however way you can get them. So that's the important thing to take away from this. On the other side of the ball, the Steelers defense had another pretty solid day. They gave up 18 points in Cleveland last week, and they cut that in half this week. So I'd say it was a pretty good performance, wouldn't you say so?
Honestly, I'm going to be very nitpicky here. I will admit, I'm being very nitpicky. While holding a team to 9 points is impressive, I would have been more impressed to see them go against Sam Bradford. And that sounds funny because thinking of Sam Bradford, he doesn't sound that amazing, but in week 1 he did so good. But this unit hasn't really had a challenge yet. I think it's going to be a rude awakening when they do, but hopefully by then the offense will start clicking better. Anyway, back to the problem at hand. The defensive line wasn't as dominant as we expected them to be. Cameron Hayward was really the only one to perform up to par, but mostly by applying a lot of pressure. There's not a whole bunch on his stat sheet that happened. He just was really, really forcing a lot of pressure onto Case Keenum. Alu and Hargrave were actually rather quiet. However, linebackers did fantastic. Both Vince Williams and Bud Dupree got sacks, and Shazier and T.J. Watt both got past his defense. Also, Anthony Chickle looked good after T.J. Watt got injured, which was a great thing. But go back to the Dupree sack, man. Dupree was so fast on that, and it surprises me every time because he's just unreal. That sack happened in no time at all. But anyway,
Do you know how many snaps he played last week?
I honestly don't know. It didn't seem like a lot because I'm pretty sure he only had a tackle and that sack, and that was it. But
Yeah, because I think they were trying to work him back into the lineup. But yeah, you're absolutely right. When he was in, I think it was even the first play of the game. Yeah, he finished with 2 tackles. Just double checking for you. I'm betting he didn't play much, but when he did, boy, you knew he was playing because he was a disruptive force from the first play of the game on defense, nearly breaking up a pass, a swing pass out to Dalvin Cook. I wanted to mention that real quick that uh, even though he didn't play a ton, he played well. So that's something very encouraging to see.
yeah, I was really close on my prediction. He just didn't get the interception. He got the pass defense. He got the sack. He just didn't get the interception. That was one of my bold predictions. I guess he didn't get the biggest one, but still. Anyway, moving to the secondary. The secondary did pretty decent, but I would hope so going against Case Keenum. They limited the Vikings to 146 passing yards as a unit, and Artie Burns recovered the sole turnover of the game. So, all in all, decent performance by the defense. What did you think of the defense's performance?
I know I just set it up for you to asking you. I think they did pretty well for you there, but I'm actually gonna agree with you. I'll say it was a good performance, but not great. And yes, the whole 9 points against thing is nice, but uh, you know they are missing their starting quarterback Sam Bradford, and he had his best game as a pro last week. Yeah, maybe the Saints defense will do that for any quarterback in the NFL, but I'm still a little hesitant, and maybe it is a little unfair, but I was hoping to see a little more from the pass rush, and I was hoping for another turnover that wasn't a garbage time turnover from the defense. So maybe it is being nitpicky, like you mentioned, to maybe ask for a couple more splash plays when they played as well as they did, but I'm still not sold on a defense that didn't pick off Case Keenum once and only sacked him twice. So yeah, it's one game, but I still think they need to play a little bit better if they're going to be hoping to compete with the top teams in the AFC. So also the TJ Watt injury is concerning. He played well before he went out, but I believe he missed the better part of the game. I think he left sometime in the second quarter if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right there.
Uh, but in any case, they played well enough for the win, and they showed that they can, for the most part, hold a team, even if they are missing their starting quarterback. So, lastly, we'll go to the special teams. Another couple interesting plays. Tyler Matakevich is again one of the featured players on special teams for the second week in a row.
Oh yeah, gotta agree here. The special teams was capped off by him and Boswell's performance. Boswell hit all 4 of his field goals and extra points. We're gonna pretend the one that got called back because of a penalty. That one didn't happen where he missed, but so he hit all 4. And while number from extraordinary length, it's just good to see, especially when on the other side Kai Forbath missed an extra point in this game. So it's good to have him. Then one of the biggest plays was obviously Matakevich getting the pass defense on a fake punt, which is his second week with the big play on special teams, as you said. So he's doing excellent as a special teams player, in my opinion. That's all you really ask for. And as for the rest of special teams, Eli Rogers did pretty bad on punt returns, trying twice for a net of -1 yards. Then there was nothing really to report on kickoffs. Schuster returned 1 to the 20, which is short of the 25, obviously, but it wasn't awful. Then Jordan Berry had an all-right day, getting 2 of his 5 punts inside the 20, including 1 at the 1-yard line, having an average of 38.6 yards per punt. And to wrap the special teams up, Canada got a false start penalty. And you know who wouldn't have gotten the false start penalty? Colin Holba. But no, that's a joke. But yeah, Canada got a penalty, which is kind of rough for a long snapper to have anything wrong. So, what did you think of special teams?
I'll agree with you. It was a pretty solid day for the most part. Yeah, Boswell should have been 3 for 4, but he did finish 4 for 4, and I felt like Barry did a pretty good job just double checking his stats here. I don't think I feel like he's been pretty solid all season, so it's nice to see that. As far as kickoff returns go, the Steelers had 2. The one you mentioned from Smith-Schuster, and as well as Terrell Watson actually returned the opening kickoff to the 26-yard line. I remember that thinking, wow, this is pretty rare. So he did a good job on that play. Eli Rogers was pretty disappointing, as you mentioned, but hey, he didn't fumble, so I guess, as long as Antonio Brown isn't back there getting killed, that's the only thing we should really be worried about. And then, as you mentioned, Tyler Matakevich with the play, probably the biggest play of the game to that point. The Steelers were up 14-3. The Vikings were punting after their opening drive of the second half and went bold, thinking maybe they could turn the game and the tide of their favor. But the turnover on downs led to a Steelers field goal, and yes, the Vikings scored a touchdown on their ensuing drive, but the damage had already been done. The Steelers were the game wasn't decided at this point, but it really swung things in the Steelers' favor at that point. So now we're moving on to our awards and our standouts from this week. So stopping with the Stronger Than Steel Big Stop of the Week. For the second week in a row, I'm going to give it to Tyler Matakevich for the previously aforementioned breakup of a fake punt against the Vikings from the first drive of the second half. I just laid out the situation. It wasn't a great throw, and it was made under pressure from the Vikings punter, but he did have a man open, and Matakevich broke up the pass, and the Steelers got the ball in good field position and came away with some more points, making it a 17-3 game at the time. There were several plays to choose from, but I feel like this particular play by Matakevich put the game in the Steelers' favor, and it really put them in the driver's seat to win the game, which they obviously eventually did. So for the second week in a row, Tyler Matakevich has won the Big Stop of the Week award. Let's move on to the Player of the Week award for
All
our
right.
Stronger Than Steel podcast.
I got Ben Roethlisberger. There was a lot of average play, so it was really kind of hard to pick someone. It was nearly Martavis Bryant, but uh, Ben threw for 243 yards and 2 touchdowns with a completion percentage of 65.7%. Then he also threw no interceptions, which is what really made him win Player of the Week, which against the Vikings defense is an achievement in itself. So Ben Roethlisberger is the Stronger Than Steel Player of the Week. Next up, we're going to introduce a new award that we have. Would you like to take the reins on the Play of the Game award?
Sure. Austin and I decided that we wanted to add one more thing in here. We each have uh, our own play of the week, the big stop of the week, but we wanted to do something together because we love watching Steelers highlights. So the play of the game, we decided that it was going to be the big catch by Martavis Bryant that I believe did it set up a touchdown? I don't believe it did. Did it?
I don't think so either, but I'll check you while you go on that.
Because I believe it was later in the game. But in any case, I believe it. I know it set up a score, but uh, boy, this play, Austin, was something to watch. Something I've watched several times, admittedly, since the game ended. Uh, in a game that lacked a lot of big highlight plays, this one was definitely one to watch over and over again. Um, Martavis Bryant streaking down the left side of the field, hadn't caught any. In fact, the Steelers kind of went role reversal from last week where they had rarely tried going down the field. I feel like they almost went deep down the field too often in this game. Several times I feel like Roethlisberger may have forced it deep when he didn't necessarily have to. But this was a play where Bryant was streaking down the side and he made a kind of a diving catch, not necessarily diving, but like falling forward, making a great catch, and it showed to me that Bryant is back. I think he shook off the rust in this game, and even if he isn't great in every game going forward, I think we now know that he can be what we thought he was a couple years ago. Are you in agreement with me?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think Martavis Bryant flashed back to 2015, and just going back to what you said, that it led to a field goal after that. So still pretty good. I mean, the 51-yard reception was pretty as anything. So
Oh, and in case we didn't know, Ben Roethlisberger can throw a pretty good deep ball. So that's definitely something that was nice to watch, and definitely the play of the game. So, uh, give me one player on each side of the ball, Austin, who impressed for you. So let's start with offense.
offense, I have David DeCastro. This is the second week in a row that I'm going to go with offensive line. I just love offensive line. It's really nice. I don't remember the exact numbers. I don't have them on me, but up until like 2 years ago, it was often talked about how often Ben Roethlisberger was hit. Ben Roethlisberger and Ryan Tannehill, they're always like the top of the league. So I've just grown a real appreciation for this line that the Steelers have had the past 2 or 3 years. So DeCastro did fantastic in pass blocking against the Vikings. Their strong defensive line really couldn't get through, and like along with their pass rushers, they all struggled. Even DeCastro was even rated as the best among guards according to Pro Football Focus's grade. So he got a 93.1. So I would say he did great. Pro Football Focus said he did great. So who is your player that impressed on offense?
If I may, Austin, going back to you talking about the Steelers' pass protection, it made me think. So I pulled up his sack rate over the course of his career, and just interesting to note that of Roethlisberger's time with the Steelers, from 2004 to 2006, Ken Wisenhunt was the offensive coordinator. Uh, 2007 to 2011, Bruce Arians was the offensive coordinator, and obviously 2012 to present, Todd Haley has been the offensive coordinator. Well, Austin, uh, Ben Roethlisberger's lowest sack percentage have each of his top years have each been years with Todd Haley. Uh, so that includes 2012 through 2017. Now, all of his lowest sack percentage numbers have been with Todd Haley. His worst sack percentage with Todd Haley was 2013 when he got sacked 7.2% of the time. or sorry, 6.7% of the time. That drops to 6.3 in 2012, 5.1 in 2014, 4.1 in 2015, 4.1 right now. Yes, they're 2 games, but still. And then last year it was a career best 3.2. So that offensive line has really been stellar when it comes to pass protection, particularly over the last few years. But anyways, getting back to what you had asked me, my standout player, the guy who impressed me on offense, was Martavis Bryant. Yeah, only 3 catches, but 2 of them were big time. And we talked at length about that 51-yard beauty, but I'll also talk about that first catch he had, which was, I believe it was 27 yards or 17.
27.
27. Well, it was an interesting play, a crossing pattern where the safety was caught way out of position, but you thought maybe he'd have a chance to catch up to Bryant, but no, Bryant was gone, absolutely gone. He outran both the cornerback and the safety to the corner, and he showed that blazing speed and quickness that he has, and that he really can break an innocent looking play for a touchdown like he's done so many times over his career. So that was a huge play for Bryant, and I felt like he was really making his presence felt, even if he only caught 3 passes last week. So now on the other side of the ball, who really impressed you on defense?
This is going to be contested, but I picked Sean Davis. He led the team in tackles with 7 and also had an assisted tackle, so I thought it was a pretty good day for him. But he did give up a big run play, and that's why it's contested. He gave up a big run that led to the Vikings sole touchdown, but I still think he had a good day other than that one mistake. So who impressed on defense for you?
Cameron Hayward impressed for me, and I'm going to say forget everything. I think he was the best player on the field on Sunday, and I don't think there's any question about that having watched the game. This guy set the table for the defense from the first snap of the game. He was all over the field and in the backfield more often than he wasn't. Uh, Even if he wasn't making the play, what he was doing allowed other players to make the play. And I feel like the reason the defense played as well as they did was because he was setting the table for them. And I think it was one of the best games I've ever seen Cameron Hayward play, and that's really saying something. But I really feel that strongly about it. So he was definitely uh, worthy of being noticed, and maybe a little surprising we didn't choose him for an award, but at the same time, I just wanted to recognize him here for as someone that impressed me. But on the flip side here, I know you had talked to me a little bit about maybe one of his defensive line partners that wasn't as good as you thought he was going to be.
Oh, yeah. My first disappointment is going to be Javon Hargrave. He didn't actually show up on the stat sheet. I can't really remember him getting much pressure in the game, so that was a little disappointing to see. Really, though, I was kind of disappointed in the whole defensive line other than Cameron Hayward in itself, but I guess that's only really focusing on him and Tyson Alualu. But, yeah, so who was your disappointment on defense?
uh, You mean defense or offense? You want me to go
Oh, go
defense first?
offense, I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine. I just wanted to clarify. On offense, I guess this is unfair, but I was disappointed with Alejandro Villanueva. And yeah, he lost a lot of weight this week and played through an illness, but at the same time, I was really concerned about Ben Roethlisberger because there were a couple times Roethlisberger came close to getting killed, and he added a penalty on top of that, so it definitely wasn't Villanueva's best day. Again, the illness uh, leads me to believe there's no reason to overreact here, but it's definitely a game he would want back, and maybe the Steelers would have been better served starting Chris Hubbard, but who knows? It's just if ands or buts now, so we can scratch that. But uh, who disappointed you on offense?
Uh, Le'Veon Bell did. The team really hasn't been able to get him going yet, and it's rather disappointing. Yes, he rushed for 27 times, and that's a lot, but it was only for 87 yards, and that's only 3.22 yards a carry, which for me to think a running back is having a decent performance, it's got to be at least 3.34. That would be, if you rush 3 times, you would get the first down if it was 1st and 10. But so it was slightly below that, and then he only got 4 receiving yards, which was kind of rough. I'm not worried yet about how he plays, but it's just disappointing to see. So,
I should have mentioned this beforehand. You had talked about Sean Davis, and how it would be a little contested. It's not really fair for me to really criticize him because he did play very well, but I was disappointed in the fact that he lost containment on the right side of the field on that big run by Dalvin Cook, which set up the touchdown. But at the same point, the rest of the defense played pretty well. It was honestly really hard finding someone to be disappointed with. So uh, I do feel like I'm nitpicking here, but I just felt like it was something I had to do. So that'll wrap things up for our recap of the game. Is there anything that sticks out to you from this game that you want to mention?
No, how about for you?
I got a couple things. One, penalties were another big problem for the Steelers. Although they didn't have all the penalties in this game. The Vikings actually had 11 in this game for 131 yards compared to the Steelers 10 for only 72. But still, the Steelers went from 13 touchdowns penalties to 10 this week. So that's 23 through 2 games. That's not good, and that's something that they really got to look into going into this next game because a game on the road against a sub 500 team is a game that the Steelers typically get penalized for a lot, and that's something they cannot afford going into Chicago, regardless of if that's a good team or not. And then lastly, I gotta be honest with you, this wasn't a super exciting game to watch. I know Austin, you were at work for most of it, but uh, I don't know. I felt like there were exciting points, but I felt like I wasn't watching that exciting of a game. And even though this was certainly a much more satisfying game than the Week 1 win over the Browns, which was a lot of headaches and worry for some poor play, but uh, I definitely have to say that there's still some fine tuning to go on for both of these teams. So that's just my final thoughts on the matter.
I got one thing to say. I apologize if you don't have anything else to say. I just remembered it.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so there's one thing that really bothered me in this game. I was thinking about it. Maybe it could be cleared up. I was confused after seeing it. The Steelers on one of their downs, they were lining up. They were lining up to kick the field goal, right? And right when they're kicking the field goal is when Cameron Canaday got that 5-yard penalty, and Jordan Berry punted the ball, and they downed at the Minnesota 1. But on that, there was a false start on the Vikings, and instead the Steelers elected to decline it. I was just kind of confused on the decision there because it would have brought if they declined it, they could have kicked the field goal again because it would have brought them 5 yards forward.
Oh, I do remember that. I don't know exactly why. My guess is that the Mike Tomlin and the Steelers were planning on punting the whole time. I don't know. Maybe they saw how Boswell shanked the kick earlier. Maybe they were worried he was gonna, I don't know, miss by that badly again. But it's only 5 yards. Maybe there was a wind or something. I don't know. I did think it was a little bizarre, but given the situation, I did understand why they did it. But I still don't think that was the best decision personally. But it was very strange watching it in person, Austin.
Okay, I'm glad you agree because I was just after seeing it, I was kind of confused. I was just like, well, they should have just went for the field goal again. I guess their mentality was, oh, we downed them at the 1, so we can maybe get like a safety here. We'll send all our rushers or something and try and get the ball back. But I obviously that didn't work out. If that was even the game plan, but yeah, I'm glad you agree.
Also, just wanted to mention the Steelers were going to go for 2 after scoring the opening touchdown of the game, but due to an extended and planned celebration by Martavis Bryant and the Steelers, some of the Steelers' offensive members, the Steelers got a delay of game penalty. I don't know if you saw that, Austin, but the Steelers' offense had to get onto the field late, and they broke the huddle with about 11 seconds left in the game clock, so that delay of game led to the Steelers attempting the extra point instead of going for 2. So, is that something to be concerned about?
That's a good question. I don't actually. I feel like they'll be talked to about the length of their celebrations and stuff. I don't think it will be a problem going forward. I think they'll try to hurry it up and then now realize like they kind of screwed up sometime in the game. I now remember now that you say it that they were going for a 2-point and then a penalty stopped them. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a problem going forward. Do you think so?
I hope not. That's all I'll say. But lastly, now that we're done with the game, we can look more into a wider perspective. So the Steelers are 2-0, but they haven't looked great, as we said. So I want you to take either an optimistic or pessimistic point of view on the Steelers' first two games.
All right. So, in my opinion, the Steelers have played both the Browns and the Vikings without Sam Bradford. And it just feels like the Steelers as a whole have yet to really face a challenge. Even this upcoming week is against the Mike Glennon-led Bears, and they got blown out by the Buccaneers last week. Not saying the Buccaneers are a bad team, but they're not amazing either. They're just kind of like a decent team, maybe just above middle of the pack. I don't really know. But it really feels like the defense is kind of carrying the team also, and I don't really like that. This team was an offensive superpower 2 years ago. I apologize. That's literally going back on something I said, I think, one podcast ago or two podcasts ago. I'm glad the defense is doing well, but it's just that the offense, the pieces are still here from the superpower that was 2 years ago, and it just feels like the pieces are out of sync. So, sure, if Antonio Brown is having a great day, it makes sense for everyone else's stats to not be great, but it just feels like only one or two players are there, and then everyone else is playing piss poorly. So it's not that I don't like that the defense is doing well. Like I said, I prefer the defense to be better than the offense. But when the offense was so great with all these pieces and they're all still there, and even maybe it's gotten better with a better offensive line and stuff, it just seems like the offense is underperforming for what they say on the stat sheet. You know what I'm saying by the names? But anyway, week 4 should be a good week to tell where the Steelers are at. That's when they face the Ravens in Baltimore. And it doesn't matter how good the Ravens are. It is always going to be a difficult game. I believe it was 2 years ago, or it might be 3 now, but the Steelers lost twice to the Ryan Mallett-led Ravens, which was really, really disappointing that year. And it was tough games. Baltimore always plays tough. So that should be a really telling game. But for now, I'm even hesitant to put the Steelers in the contender to put the Steelers on a contender list, as we'll get to later. I thought we were going to do that earlier. It was my bad.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Just real quickly, that was 2015 when the Steelers got swept by the Ravens. The second game was the Ryan Mallett game you're remembering, but the first game was a Joe Flacco-led Ravens team on a Thursday night football game. But Michael Vick was making his first Steelers start in that game, so that's what that game was all about.
Oh, okay, my bad. I must have confused it. But what's your stance on the Steelers 2-0 start?
I'm pretty much exactly in the same place as you, Austin. I'll just sum it up real quick. The defense has played well, but they also haven't been tested like you already mentioned. And on top of that, the offense has just not met expectations, even though they've played well enough to win. So that's as simple as it gets. So there's still work to be done. So now that we've had a couple games to look at, who's one player that's impressed you and one player that's disappointed you?
I'll start with the impressed, and I'm actually going to give it to a unit as a whole only because I couldn't really focus on a player. I'm giving it to the offensive line. The line has kept up so far for the most part, only giving up 2 sacks, and both came on a Villanueva's sick day. So while I think Finney or Hubbard should have been playing, I don't really hold it against him. Other than that, though, the offensive line has been playing fantastic together, mostly in pass blocking. Their run blocking hasn't been great, but, I mean, still, I think they're performing the best out of almost every unit I can think of. Definitely on the offense, anyway. But Roethlisberger is probably the best line he's ever had right now, as stats are showing at the moment. Like you said, 2 weeks in, but it's still the lowest sack percentage at the moment. But who's impressing through 2 weeks for you?
I'm actually going to go with Ben Roethlisberger, and that's just because I feel like individually nobody else had a really great week for both games. He hasn't been amazing, but it all hasn't been on him either. He's dealt with poor game planning in week 1, poor play from his receivers at times, specifically week 1, and a non-existent running game, certainly week 1 and parts of week 2 as well, but he's been pretty solid all around. Yeah, we'd like his yardage numbers to be higher, but he also had a couple big pass interference penalties called against the defense that would have led to higher passing yardage numbers last week. He only has 1 turnover so far, which was tipped, and he's made big plays when needed to, even if he's been misfiring on a few easy plays. But I think he's played pretty well, even if it hasn't been spectacular, and I think that's important going forward with an aging quarterback such as himself. Um, I'm going to jump right into the disappointment, and I'm disappointed in the offensive line. Yeah, that's a unit like you were going with Austin, but I'm not disappointed in the pass protection. In fact, I've been pretty happy with it considering the defensive fronts that they've played. Uh, the run blocking is something I am disappointed in them though. Le'Veon Bell is now on pace to rush for less than 1,000 yards, and while you and I'm sure both think that he's going to rush for more than that. This is now the second week in a row where he's been averaging around 3.5 yards a carry, and that's just not going to cut it. Um, yeah, some of it might be Le'Veon Bell's fault himself, but I believe just what I see, Bell is getting hit a lot sooner or closer to the line of scrimmage than he was at any point last year, and I feel like he's getting the ball and he's not getting space to do anything with the ball. So I think that might fall on the offensive line. And yeah, week one it had more to do with a bad game plan running right into a big defensive front with safeties in the box, but I wanted to see a little more from them this week, and there's still time, obviously, and it was a good thing they got Bell the ball as much as they did, but they still have work to do. It's time to show up. So, who disappointed for you, Austin?
This is sort of a 50-50 one because I have Bell, but I also want to give him credit where credit is due, where it's not all his fault. I think coaching plays into it. I think that it's been a little bit of disappointing in coaching calls in the first 2 weeks, but the part where I think Bell is, it's just he's just not been able to get it going. And like you said, it might be in part to the offensive line, but I feel like the offensive line has kept the pocket clean. Maybe they're not pushing guys back as far, but they haven't really been letting these guys get off their blocks super easy. But it's really hard to say because week one was mostly coaching, in my opinion. I thought that was mostly on the offensive plan that was happening and the position they were put in so that they couldn't rush in their opinion. But week two was a hard defense, so we'll really see what happens week three.
All right. Well, looking ahead at the Steelers' schedule, they have an interesting 3 games ahead. Obviously, next week they're at Chicago to face the Bears. The next week they're at Baltimore to play the Ravens, and then they're home to face the Jaguars. So that means you have right now Mike Glennon, Joe Flacco, and Blake Bortles. So that means Joe Flacco is the only proven quarterback the Steelers are going to face over the first 5 weeks of the season. How likely is a 5-0 start for them?
I'm actually going to probably go with a surprise here and say 25%. It's very low, I know. And I was going to save this for our preview episode on our next podcast, but I'll just say it now because it makes more sense why I said 25%. The Bears right now are below .500. Where are the Steelers going? To the Bears. It's week 3. I quite remember fondly a week 3 last year on the road. The Steelers started 2-0. The Steelers' offense looked like it was firing, and the Steelers were supposed to not blow out, but pretty easily beat a Philadelphia Eagles team that had Carson Wentz starting. And the Steelers went in there and just got destroyed. It was 34-3.
Yes.
And that's just I'm just having flashbacks. This could be just stupid, and then the Steelers blow out the Bears, but I think the Bears have a chance of winning this, and it's disgusting. I honestly think I'm picking the Bears to win next week, and that's only part of the reason why I'm giving them 30%. The next up is the Ravens. Like I said, the Ravens earlier, the Steelers just have been struggling against them in like the last decade. I would say maybe just 8 years or so, but I really feel like that could easily be a loss. The Bears one is more of a stretch, and just me looking at how the Steelers do on the road against .500 teams, but I wouldn't be surprised, to say the least, if they lose to the Bears or the Ravens, or both, maybe. But I think the Jaguars game is a win. But what do you think?
Austin, we're on the same wavelength here. I was actually thinking about, I probably wasn't going to, but I'm seriously considering picking the Bears to win next week. And that's not being unfair. That's looking at the previous track record against sub-500 teams on the road in the Mike Tomlin era. And that's knowing what you've seen. And that's a lot of poor football games, a lot of poorly coached, a lot of poorly played and executed games against those types of teams. I'll start right off and I'll say I believe the Steelers are going to win at home against the Jaguars rather handily. I think that we're both in agreement there. The Steelers are the better team on paper in the next two games each, but all signs point to an easy road win. But, then again, so did the Eagles in week 3 of last year. So did the Ravens in week 16 of 2015. So did the Jets after Ben Roethlisberger had thrown 6 touchdown passes in back to back weeks and then followed that up with one of the probably the most frustrating game I've ever had as a fan, probably in that game. I will not ever forget how frustrated I was in that game after I saw a tweet that said, oh, he has, 12 touchdown passes in 2 games, and oh, now he has 13 and 3. And I was like, oh my God. That game bothered me so much, and we've seen games like that for each of the next 2 years. So there's no reason to suspect it's not going to happen again. Whether it's against the Bears or another team is a question, but they're a prime candidate. It's an early season opponent on the road in what traditionally weather makes it a tough place to play. They're unquestionably bad, which means the Steelers are in bad shape for that game. uh, the running game has not been good. I don't know. It seems like it could be one of those games. So we'll get to that again later in the week. But I had to run off on that. But we'll wrap up looking ahead for now, and we'll just get to some quick Steelers news right now. Over the course of 2 weeks now, James Harrison has played in 4 total defensive snaps and didn't play at all last week. Harrison has been passed over for guys like Anthony Chickillo and even Arthur Most for a couple of plays. Is this something to really pay attention to right now, Austin? What do you make of all this?
I really think that the putting the Chickillo in and putting Chickillo in and Moats in, I think Mike Tomlin's reasoning was spot on. You had to go with the guy that's already hot, and that was Chickillo. It hurts because I think everyone loves Harrison or fears him if you're a fan of an opposing team, and you want to see him play. He's just a fan favorite. He's who everyone loves. But he's mostly there really as another leader on the defense. It's to have a seasoned veteran there that can come in when called upon, because he could still play, I think. It's just he's older now. You want to see the younger guys go in. You don't want James Harrison to keep going in because you can't rely on him in the future. This is likely James Harrison's at least one of his last years. He can't be going on for much longer. He is so old for a football player anyway. He's only 39. But I like the decision for Chickillo to go in and Moats at times. So what do you think?
I'm in complete agreement with you. It's been talked about all offseason what the plan to use Harrison was going to be like. And I think we all believe that Harrison is still a capable player and certainly a solid pass rusher, maybe one of the Steelers' best overall. But the fact of the matter is, it's a week 2 game against an NFC opponent where losing this game doesn't mean that much at all. So why play him when you have so much more to learn from playing guys like Anthony Chickillo or TJ Watt a ton more? Harrison is there as an insurance policy, the same way I thought Justin Hunter was insurance policy for Martavis Bryant should he never return. Harrison's there in case, God forbid, a TJ Watt injury, or maybe beyond that, an Anthony Chickillo injury right now. There's no reason for him to play right now. I suspect he's going to be used in those bigger games in the regular season and certainly in the postseason when we know he is at his best. So that's something I don't think is that big of a deal right now. But obviously, Steeler Nation has probably overreacted to it as they normally will. But in any case, we're going to take a wider look at the NFL right now. We're going to go look at the rest of the games from last week that we picked for our Vegas lines, but we're quickly going to pick next week's Thursday night game, which is the Los Angeles Rams at the San Francisco 49ers. Austin, the Rams are 2.5-point favorites on the road. Who do you got?
I got the Rams covering the spread. I think it's quite easy for them. Who do you have?
I'm actually going to go with the Niners plus 2.5 points. I thought the Rams were home for this game, but now that I'm seeing that the Niners are our home, I'm actually going to go with the Niners with the points because just seeing over the years, I've seen the Steelers lose and not play well in a lot of Thursday night games, especially on the road. And I just think trying to play a team on the road on a Thursday night game is usually not a good recipe for success. And yeah, I think the Rams are just so much better, they'll win anyways, but I think it's going to be, excuse me, a tough, contested, and close game, even if it's not going to be good. But that's just my opinion. So now that we're on the topic of other games and the line scores from this week, let's look back at last week and see how we did, Austin, shall we?
Sure.
All right. So starting with last week, we had the Browns at Ravens. The Ravens were 8-point favorites. Uh, Austin, you said the Ravens, or sorry, you said the Ravens, or sorry, Browns plus 8 points, or I guess Ravens plus 8 points. I think it's Browns plus 8.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I actually, I'm sorry, I read it wrong. You had the Ravens didn't cover but still win, and I had the Ravens covering plus 8. The Ravens did cover, winning by 14, so there's that game. Titans at Jaguars. We both had the Titans covering the spread, which was 1.5 points, and they won handily, 37-16. Austin and I both went with the upset pick, the Bills over the Panthers, who were 7-point favorites. And had it not been for Zay Jones dropping what would have been the game-winning touchdown pass with time expiring, we would have been right. But because of that, because of you, Zay Jones, we took the L there. So I'm not happy with you for that. Uh, Austin got the Patriots and New Orleans Saints pick right because he is smart, and I decided that for some reason to go against conventional wisdom, and I picked the Saints plus 6, and they lost by 16. Austin picked the Patriots to cover the spread, so he was definitely correct there. Um, Cardinals at Colts. We both had Arizona covering, and we both did not realize how bad they actually are. They eked out a victory over the Jacoby Brissett led Colts. What an ugly game that was, Austin. Oh my
Oh,
God. That was some poor football. A better game, a much better game, was the Eagles at Chiefs. Chiefs 5.5 point favorites. I had Kansas City covering, and they just did barely. Austin had Philadelphia plus 5.5. Just missed out on that one. That's a
and
tough.
the Eagles were in that too. The Eagles really shot themselves in the foot. I kind of suspected that the Eagles were going to do well. In the beginning, it looked so close, and then Kansas City just pulled away.
Kind of just like they did in Week 1 against a much different opponent, though. Chicago at Tampa Bay. Mike Glennon against his old team. Tampa Bay was a 7-point favorite. Austin took Chicago plus 7. I had Tampa Bay covering. We had different reasons for that, but the Buccaneers won pretty easily at 29-7. The Los Angeles Chargers first game in LA since the 1960s, I believe. The Chargers were 3.5 point favorites. I mistakenly said the Chargers would cover, but then again, the Chargers once more played in a close game and lost by 2. So Austin coming through with the upset pick and being correct as well. That's another one for him. Jets at Raiders. Oakland minus 13.5. I thought that was just way too much, and I took the Jets plus 13.5, and Austin took the Raiders to cover. It was actually pretty close, Austin, 15 points. So that one was a little closer than we probably would have anticipated, but Austin still gets one there. And Austin picks up another one with this game. The Redskins, 2.5 point underdogs to the Rams at home, who are at home. Uh, Austin had the Redskins winning in an upset, which they did 27-20. And whoops, I'm sorry, I misspoke for the Jets and Raiders. It's late. It's actually early. It's early Thursday morning. Um, in any case, because I can't math, the Rams. I picked the Rams to cover, and they lost by 7. So, yay, good for me. Dallas at Denver. This is one I was pretty happy about. The Cowboys were 2.5 point favorites on the road, and the Broncos spanked them 42-17. Austin had Dallas winning and covering, and I had Denver winning outright. Uh, San Francisco at Seattle. Seattle was a 14-point favorite at home, and Austin and I weren't seeing through that. We both picked Seattle to win, but we took San Francisco in the points, and the Seahawks are a dreaded football team at winning 12-9 though. Oh, that was not a fun game either.
Are they done being overrated? Can they be taken out of the top 5 in most power rankings yet? Are we done with that?
I still think we're a few weeks away from that, but I think we're finally starting to see that they aren't as good as people think that they are. Sunday night football. Green Bay Packers at the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons were 3-point favorites. We both had Green Bay winning a revenge game in an upset, and we were both wrong. The Falcons spanked them, and yes, the Packers did make it a close game, but for most of that game, the Falcons were in control. The Monday night game, another ugly game. A lot of ugly football games early on. The Giants' 3-point favorites at home were no match for the Lions, who are now 2-0, winning 24-10. I had Detroit winning, and Austin had the Giants covering. Last but not least, I think we should double check the line score. Did you, Austin? I think you did.
I did. I checked it. It was originally +6, and then -6, and then went to -8.5.
That was after the Case. I believe it was after the Case Keenum news that Sam Bradford was not going to play. In any case, we had made our picks when it was +6, so Austin took the Vikings +6. And I'm sorry, I'm reading what you had said. I had Pittsburgh covering. Regardless, the Steelers, or sorry, I have it backwards. It's been such a rough day. Oh my goodness. Austin, you had Pittsburgh covering, and they did regardless, so you got that. I had the Vikings +6, and Austin had actually had brought this up to me on Twitter before the game that would my final score prediction change with Case Keenum in the lineup, and I said, yeah, it does. So originally I had said 24-20, so I would have taken the Vikings with the points, but when I learned of Keenum starting, I changed my final score prediction to 27-13, so I was pretty close, but I did get it right that time. So now Austin was kind enough to change our records from the previous excursion, if you will. Austin was 7-8, and I was 8-7. So pretty mediocre week for both of us, I guess. But then again, there's also 2 chances for us to be wrong and only 1 to be correct. So I think that was a pretty good first week for us, all things considered. Moving on to the next thing, there are 10 teams left in the NFL that are undefeated, including the Steelers, the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, the Detroit Lions, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Miami Dolphins, Baltimore Ravens, Kansas City Chiefs, Oakland Raiders, and Denver Broncos. Which of these teams are legit and which teams aren't? So give me 5 of each if you can, Austin.
Sure. My contenders are the Raiders, the Chiefs, the Falcons, the Steelers, and the Lions, because I wanted to be different. And my pretenders are the Panthers, the Broncos, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Dolphins, and the Ravens. The one I really wanted to make a contender, I wanted to make the Broncos a contender, because if Trevor Siemian keeps playing like that, if C.J. Anderson keeps playing like that, that team is going places. That defense is already stellar. We already knew that. But, I mean, they all did really well that game. Obviously, Talib had a 103-yard pick six in garbage time. So they were doing amazing. And that was against I can't remember a time where Zeke was really kept in check. And that game, I think he rushed for 8 yards on 9 attempts, if my stats are correct. And they really kept him in check. But other than that, I think the Raiders are clear contenders. Marshawn Lynch looks pretty much just as good as when he left. Derek Carr is still great. Michael Crabtree is making plays for the Raiders. Like, he caught 3 touchdowns this weekend. I mean, of course, against the Jets, but regardless, Amari Cooper didn't fare that well. So, Chiefs, I think Spencer Ware getting hurt might have been the best thing to happen to their season, which is awful to say, but I don't think the Chiefs get here with Spencer Ware. I think Kareem Hunt is really, really a different kind of player. I mean, maybe it won't happen for years to come, but at least for this year, right now, he is really doing a lot for this team. As for the Falcons kind of impressed me. I honestly, even though they were Super Bowl contenders, I'd never really take the NFC South seriously because, as I said in the last podcast, there's been a different division winner since 2002 every year. So, but I mean, beating Green Bay like that again, just like they did in the NFC Championship game, I think that was pretty telling. And then Lions, I like how I originally thought they were a pretender, and then now it's kind of fuzzy because I don't know how the Giants were. I thought highly of the Giants before, but now I'm thinking they're kind of like a Seahawks-ish team, and Brandon Marshall is more washed than I thought. I remember telling Giants fans, like, Brandon Marshall, first of all, isn't a good locker room have, and second of all, he's never been on a playoff team. Third, he's just not good anymore. He's kind of older. He's like he's reaching the end of his career, and then I got contested. Like, no, Brandon Marshall's great red zone threat. Amazing, and I think through 2 weeks now he has 4 catches, or even just 3 maybe, and it was just rough. But other than that, I'll try to go quick through the pretenders. The Panthers aren't good. Tampa Bay won 1 game against Chicago. Dolphins, they won 1 game against the Chargers, and the Chargers blow fourth quarter leads like it's nothing. And if I said his name right, Young-Hoo Kim, I think that's how you say it, he missed a game-winning field goal for the second week in a row. So I don't think that's that impressive. I'm never going to make a Jay Cutler-led team a contender. And the Ravens have so many injuries. They've just been lucky to face the Browns and the Bengals that they can't even go anywhere.
They just lost Marshall Yanda for the year. They're one of the best offensive linemen in the league. So, yeah.
Exactly. So let's hear your contenders.
Pretty much the same thing. One minor difference, though. We both had the Steelers, Falcons, Chiefs, and Raiders. The one difference was I had the Broncos instead of the Lions. Look, you already mentioned it. The Falcons christened their home building with the dominant performance, just like the one they had in the last game in their last building. And boy, what a game that was! Ugly. The Chiefs, looks like they're for real, and that's interesting because I still thought Spencer Ware was going to be a really good player, and all of a sudden Kareem Hunt is like, you thought that, but here I am, and he's played fantastic. The Raiders are for real, we know that, and oh my God. The Broncos win last week kind of validated them in my eyes. Maybe it is a bit early, but man, what a team they could be if, like you said, C.J. Anderson and Trevor Siemian keep playing the way they do, but on the other side, the Panthers are terrible. I don't think they're that good. They beat the Niners, congratulations, and the Bills, who really should have beaten you. So congratulations to that. That offense is garbage. And they just lost Greg Olsen for at least 5 weeks, maybe more. So that sucks for them. The Lions, I'm still not sold just yet. I need to see a few more games first. The Ravens, you already mentioned injuries. Miami Dolphins and Buccaneers are 1-0. And the Buccaneers may make me think a little bit, but the Dolphins certainly don't. No Jay Cutler. That's enough of that. Speaking of the Dolphins, though, and Jay Cutler, one of their players, former Pittsburgh Steeler linebacker Lawrence Timmons, has been suspended indefinitely after going AWOL on Sunday before the game. Austin, being so kind to find the information, was reportedly found in the airport trying to head back to Pennsylvania to see his daughter, but we don't know all the details yet. What we do know is that this is likely going to nullify his guaranteed money from the Dolphins, and there's a chance he gets cut in the upcoming weeks. So what do you make of this situation?
This was really interesting to hear about a player that never caused any issues in Pittsburgh. He was always like just a good guy. He's not a bad guy for this. It's just he never caused any problems. It's kind of sad to see, but I'm really looking to find out his reasonings. And for Steelers fans saying that he's coming back to Pittsburgh, the Steelers have no money left, even if he was. But it's just kind of interesting to think about. The reason he left Pittsburgh was the guaranteed money that Dolphins gave him. If I remember correctly, the Dolphins guaranteed him $6 million, and the Steelers just couldn't match that. And now that it's all gone, it's just kind of like, well, now it doesn't really matter, does it? So, what do you think?
Well, I don't really know what's going on. Reports are that it has nothing to do with CTE. I suppose there were some concerns there was some onset CTE, so that's good. But it's so bizarre. He almost never missed practice, and let alone games. I think he only missed one since 2009, which was his third year. I'm definitely worried about him for sure. I'm not going to commit on a potential return for Timmons to Pittsburgh until we know he's A-OK to play again first. So let's take it one step at a time and hope that he's okay. Um, but in related news, the Dolphins potentially cutting him. There's more ammo for that since they traded a fifth round pick for the upcoming draft this year for Saints linebacker Stephon Anthony. Do you know anything about this guy?
Not really, honestly, but trading for any Saints defensive player doesn't sound like a great idea, especially even if he's a backup. If you're backing up those guys, you're not probably getting a good player. Do you know anything about him?
Nope, but it sounds like the Dolphins aren't sure how long this Timmons ordeal is going to last, and I think they don't want to have anything to do with it. So he could be a free agent pretty soon. So that's definitely concerning for him. Is there anything else you wanted to add today before we wrap things up?
I just wanted to go back and say something about something you said earlier. You mentioned that Jets game that was really disgusting in 2014. I had to go to that with 3 Jets fans, and I sat there and watched the whole time and got berated after I talked so much smack talk before that game because of the 6 touchdown performances. I just wanted to mention that.
You're the reason that they lost then, Austin.
I really am.
It's karma. That watching that on TV was I was watching that from my dorm. I'll never forget how frustrated I was. We know what. Sometime let's make a list of the most frustrating games we've ever seen from the Steelers. Yep. That would be up there for me. But in any case, that's all we have for you today. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. If you have any questions about the show or questions you want us to answer on air, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check us out. We're on several social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Check out our episodes on SoundCloud and YouTube, and of course our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, we went a little over 1 hour here. A lot of information to get to, but it's time to go to bed. So, Steeler Nation, thank you again for joining us today. And Austin, you have a fantastic night as always, my friend.
You too, man. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.